It was a cold autumn evening when 28-year-old Emma Carter walked out of her apartment in the small town of Ridgewood. She had told her roommate, Sarah, that she was going for a quick walk to clear her head. She left her phone on the kitchen counter, grabbed her jacket, and stepped into the crisp October air. That was the last time anyone saw her. Emma's disappearance shook the quiet town to its core. Ridgewood was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where doors were left unlocked, and where nothing truly bad ever seemed to happen. But now, the streets felt different, quieter, heavier, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Emma was a creature of habit. She worked as a librarian at the local library, loved reading mystery novels, and spent her weekends hiking the nearby trails. Her friends described her as kind, thoughtful, and a little reserved. She wasn't the type to take risks or make impulsive decisions. That evening, Emma had seemed perfectly normal. Her roommate, Sarah, later told the police that Emma had been in good spirits. They had spent the afternoon watching a movie and eating takeout. There was no argument, no sign of distress, nothing to suggest that Emma wouldn't come back. When Sarah realized Emma hadn't returned after an hour, she started to worry. By midnight, she was calling Emma's friends and family. By morning, the police were involved. The search for Emma was immediate and intense. Volunteers combed the nearby woods, police dogs sniffed for her scent, and flyers with her photo were plastered all over town. The local news picked up the story, and soon everyone in Ridgewood was talking about Emma Carter. But as the days turned into weeks, the search yielded nothing. No footprints, no belongings, no witnesses. It was as if Emma had simply vanished into thin air. The police investigated every lead. They questioned her friends, family, and co-workers. They reviewed security footage from nearby streets and businesses. They even brought in psychics, though the detectives were skeptical. But no matter how hard they looked, they found no answers. As the investigation stalled, theories began to circulate. Some believed Emma had been abducted. Ridgewood was close to a major highway, and it wasn't impossible to imagine someone driving through town and taking her. Others speculated that she had run away, though those who knew her dismissed the idea. Emma had no history of mental health issues, no financial troubles, and no reason to leave her life behind. A few people whispered darker, stranger theories. Ridgewood was surrounded by dense forests, and some locals believed the woods were cursed. Over the years, there had been stories of people disappearing in the area, hikers who never returned, hunters who were never found. Some said the forest had a way of swallowing people whole. Months after Emma's disappearance, Sarah, her roommate, revealed something she had kept to herself. On the night Emma vanished, she had heard something strange. Around 10 p.m., just an hour after Emma left, Sarah had been lying in bed when she heard a faint sound outside the window. It was a low, humming noise, almost like a distant engine. She had dismissed it at the time, thinking it was just a car passing by. But now, she wasn't so sure. The police investigated this new detail, but it led nowhere. There were no reports of unusual activity in the area that night, no witnesses who had seen or heard anything out of the ordinary. A year passed, and Emma's case went cold. Her family held a vigil on the anniversary of her disappearance, lighting candles and sharing memories of the bright, kind woman they had lost. But as time went on, the town of Ridgewood began to move on. Then, 2 years after Emma's disappearance, a hiker in the woods stumbled upon something strange. Deep in the forest, miles from any trail, he found a single shoe. It was muddy and weathered, but it matched the description of the shoes Emma had been wearing the night she disappeared. The discovery reignited the investigation. Search teams returned to the woods, scouring the area for any sign of Emma. They found nothing else. No clothing, no remains, no evidence of what might have happened to her. The shoe raised more questions than it answered. How had it ended up so far from town? Had Emma walked there herself, or had someone taken her? Despite the renewed search efforts, Emma's case remains unsolved. Her family continues to hope for answers, but as the years go by, the chances of finding her alive grow slimmer. In Ridgewood, Emma's story has become a local legend. Some believe she was taken by someone or something that can't be explained. Others think she's still out there, lost but alive, waiting to be found. Years later, hikers in the woods near Ridgewood occasionally report strange occurrences. Some claim to hear faint humming noises like the one Sarah described. Others say they've seen fleeting shadows or felt an inexplicable sense of unease. Emma's story has become a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly a life can change, how someone can vanish without a trace, leaving behind only questions and the faint hope that one day, the truth will come to light. It was an old, dusty phone, sitting on a table in an abandoned house. Black, slightly scratched, and eerily out of place, it seemed to be waiting for someone to pick it up. But it never rang, and it was never supposed to. The locals whispered about it, warning that if it ever did ring, no one should answer. It all began when Tom and his friends decided to spend a weekend exploring an old, decrepit mansion on the outskirts of town. The mansion was infamous, shrouded in dark rumors and ghost stories. People said a strange family had lived there decades ago, only to vanish without a trace. No one knew what had happened to them, but neighbors swore they'd heard strange noises and seen flickering lights in the windows long after the house was abandoned. Tom, his girlfriend Lena, and their two friends, John and Greta, were thrill-seekers. They didn't believe in ghosts or curses, and the idea of spending a night in the mansion seemed like the perfect adventure. They packed flashlights, snacks, and a camera, ready to debunk the myths surrounding the place. When they entered the mansion, the air felt heavy, as if the house itself was alive. The floorboards creaked under their feet, and the walls were covered in mold and peeling wallpaper. They wandered through the rooms, laughing and taking pictures, until they stumbled upon a small, dark room on the second floor. There, on a table in the center of the room, sat the phone. It was an old rotary phone, black and polished, strangely clean compared to the rest of the decaying house. Lena stepped closer and touched it. "Weird. It's not even dusty," she said. Tom shrugged. "Maybe someone's been here recently?" John, always the joker, smirked. "Maybe it's the phone. You know, the one everyone talks about? The one that's never supposed to ring?" Greta rolled her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous. It's just a phone." Night fell quickly. They set up camp in the living room, lighting candles and telling ghost stories. But Lena kept glancing toward the staircase as if something was bothering her. "What's wrong?" Tom asked. Lena shook her head. "It's nothing. Just that phone. It's creeping me out." John laughed. "What, you think it's going to call you?" But his laughter was cut short when a faint ring echoed from upstairs. The group froze. They stared at each other, unsure if they'd really heard it. Then the phone rang again. "That's impossible," Greta whispered. "That phone can't work. There's no electricity here." Tom stood up. "I'll go check it out." Lena grabbed his arm. "Don't, just leave it alone." But Tom was determined. He climbed the stairs, his flashlight casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. The others stayed behind, listening to his footsteps as he reached the room. The ringing stopped as soon as he entered. Tom approached the phone cautiously and picked up the receiver. It was cold, unnaturally so. He held it to his ear, but there was only silence. Then a whisper. A woman's voice, faint and raspy. "Why are you here? They're watching you." Tom dropped the receiver and stumbled back. His heart pounded in his chest and he wanted to run, but something held him in place. The phone began to ring again. Downstairs, the others heard Tom shout. They rushed upstairs and found him standing by the phone, pale and trembling. "What happened?" Lena asked. Tom shook his head. "We need to leave. Now." But as they turned to leave, the phone rang again. This time, John stepped forward. "It's just a stupid phone," he said, picking up the receiver. He listened for a moment, and his face changed. His eyes widened, his hands began to shake, and he dropped the receiver. "They're coming!" he screamed. "They're coming!" Suddenly, the candles went out. Darkness enveloped the room, and the air filled with whispers. Voices, soft but clear, speaking in a language none of them understood. Lena started crying, and Tom tried to comfort her, but he was paralyzed with fear. The phone rang again. No one dared to touch it. The ringing grew louder and louder, echoing through the house, until Tom finally shouted, "Leave us alone!" And then, silence. They fled the mansion at dawn, shaken and terrified. None of them ever returned, but Tom couldn't escape the phone. He heard it in his dreams, the whispers growing louder each night. "You can't run," they said. "They're always watching." A few weeks later, Tom disappeared. His friends searched for him, but he was nowhere to be found. Then, one day, Lena received a package. Inside was the same black phone. It was a note. Attached to it was a note. It was never meant to ring. She wanted to throw it away, but something stopped her. That night, the phone in her room began to ring.